introduce yourself?
My name's Mary Bockover. I teach at Humboldt State University in the Department of Philosophy.
How do you identify religiously?
I identify as a Christian.
Where do you see yourself in relation to the LGBT community?
I see myself as an ally and advocate.
What are your credentials and where do you work?
I work at Humboldt State University and I'm a professor in the Department of Philosophy. And I guess that sums it up.
You already answered that question.
That's okay.
What have your experiences been as someone who is active in the Episcopal community while also being an ally of the LGBT community, and what kind of problems have you encountered or witnessed as an ally?
Could you restate that?
Yes. What have your experiences been as someone who is an active member of the Episcopal community while also being an ally of the LGBT community?
It has been excellent. In the church where I celebrate, which is St. Albans in Arcata. I was on the founding team to make the church a welcoming church. The congregation is very open to LGBTQ members. Almost everyone that I'm aware of sees being open to a diverse range of people as a calling of Christ, basically. And more than that, it's not just a commitment not to discriminate, it's a commitment to advocate, right? Because you can look at this in two ways. Some people say, oh, we will welcome the sinner, right? Suggesting pretty clearly that they think that LGBTQ identities have problems, but we welcome problematic identities. I'm not comfortable with that because I don't think there is a problem with that identity at all. And the reason I feel so comfortable at St. Albans is because they see it as a justice issue to promote equality and participation among LGBTQ members of our congregation as fully moral and equal participants in the church.
What kind of problems have you encountered or witnessed as an ally?
Oh my goodness, I'm 57 years old, so I've seen a lot of changes over the decades, and I never thought I'd see same-sex marriage become the law of the land in my lifetime. And remember, it was only 2008 that Proposition 8 was put on the books and became part of the California state constitution, making same-sex marriage explicitly unconstitutional. So I've seen a lot of tension, but when I was young, when I was your age, and even earlier growing up, being queer was radically, completely unacceptable. People would lose their jobs, they'd lose their homes, believe it or not, if they're renting, and it was found out that they were of an LGBTQ identity, they'd be kicked out. And now you think, well, the law should protect people from that kind of thing. Well, now it does more and more, but it's still not, a completely protected institution. So I've seen a lot of changes over the time, and I think there's still a lot of work to be done.
As a professor at HSU, how have you integrated a deeper understanding of the issues faced by the LGBTQ community and acceptance into the ways you teach and conduct your classes?
I teach a class called The Philosophy of Sex and Love, and quite intentionally and not always to students' liking, but quite intentionally, I designed that course to deal with, probing social and ethical issues. We begin, with the topic of rape, and very often people will think, oh gosh, I thought this was about sex and love, not realizing that, this is one way that sex has been deployed to, to harm, what, 1 in 4, uh, females, certainly on campuses, have been victims of sexual assault, or certainly have reported that. So what I do is I try to bring in issues, particularly with later on topics of LGBTQ, transgender identities, and not just talking about it as a social and ethical issue, but talking about it in terms of personal identity, what it means to actually be a person at a deeper level. And more people are wanting to have the power to at least influence how they're identified. They don't want that just to be imposed from the outside. They want to have some choice, have a voice in how they are identified. So that's happening more and more. So I do that in my classes with moral controversies. We don't deal with the topic so much. I do that in philosophy of sex and love, but certainly everybody will feel, hopefully, completely welcome and, willing to not only share, but also be willing to listen.
What have you done to bring that not only in your classes, but on the campus itself?
Well, every year I participate in the Humboldt Pride Parade, and I make announcements to my students that that's going on. I'll post it so people can know, particularly first-year students can know how to get there, can coordinate for ride shares if need be. One of the most important things I think that I do, it's fairly small, I guess, in the grand scheme of things as far as time is concerned, but November 20th every year is Transgender Day of Remembrance. And I make a point of not only announcing that and participating in these celebrations, or the memorials, really. Celebration is not quite the word for it, but the memorials on campus and in Eureka and Arcata. Making it known just how much the transgender community in particular, transgender women of color, most particularly, are the targets of violence. And, making people aware, making people aware. I mean, when I was your age, it seemed like the conversation was only focused around homosexual people. And now we realize that there is this widening range of people who have a variety of different identities that need to be protected. So the other thing I do, or I've done, is I've created the HSU Philosophy Forum, and it used to be the HSU Ethics Forum. And we would bring in topics, not always, it would depend upon the semester, but topics that would deal with LGBTQ issues, particularly when Prop 8 was kind of simmering, but since then as well. Also try to involve other colleagues in that effort.
We know that you were influential to bringing Janet Mock to the campus.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more to that and how you do that every year with other
Important speakers.
Important speakers?
Yeah, brought Peter Singer, who does environmental ethics, but Janet Mock was, I thought, also an important person to bring to campus as a transgender woman of color, because Humboldt, for a rural community, has a large number, not only of LGBTQ people, but particularly transgender people. And so I think that having Janet come and speak was just really a real support It was a real support for the students who have often felt like they haven't had any real role model, let alone anybody who could really speak for them. And I brought Janet Mock through the HSU Philosophy Forum, by the way. That was one of the venues. And next spring, we'll be, hopefully, if it works out, and I think it will, we'll be bringing Jennifer Finney Boyland, who's also a trans woman, a Caucasian trans woman, to campus through the same forum. So it'll be exciting.
What is your opinion of the different queer groups on campus, and do you think HSU is doing all they can to promote a healthy and safe environment for people who are part of the LGBTQ community?
I think Humboldt should be proud, and I know nothing's perfect, but as far as the work done around, and not just different sexual identities, but just being in the forefront of Title IX, of being some of the writers for the CRGS department, Kim Berry and others, secured substantial grant to institutionally work on combating sexualized violence. And she, among others, and I've been supportive of this too, have run a Act to End Sexualized Violence course. I have that now a component of my Philosophies of Sex and Love class and the Moral Controversies class. So I think, we in many ways set the standard for what other universities should be doing to be supportive of their LGBTQ students.
Along those same lines, what is your opinion on the religious groups on campus and how they accommodate queer people?
If they even do accommodate queer people? If you've had any interactions with the religious groups on campus
and
at all.
one church that is coordinated with HSU, which is the Newman Center.
Right. Well, this is an interesting question because I'm, how to put this, I've been very much connected with the Newman Center through a very dear friend of mine, Father Eric Fried, who's no longer alive, who was the priest and basically the main person at the Newman Center when he was alive, actually until he died. I think he transitioned a little bit toward the end, but philosophically, the Roman Catholic Church holds the position that I was telling you about. It's why I'm not Roman Catholic anymore. Is that we don't accept LGBTQ activity,
but we'll accept the center.
Right. So this is not okay. Why? Because the kind of sexual behavior that's involved is seen as deviant in being not procreative.
Mm-hmm. Kind of switching gears here. How did your childhood affect how you interpret and interact with the LGBT community and religion? It can be very general. It doesn't have to go into.
Yeah, I was astounded by how much. I was raised just outside of Washington D.C. and I saw tremendous prejudice toward the African American community there, and very big differences between the sort of the suburban and even the urban white people, white communities, and the inner city black community. I had an African American caregiver who came from the inner city, and it was just, I guess that's part of what really sensitized me. Part of what really sensitized me is, this woman was very, very dear to me. I loved her a great deal and had a really hard time seeing how her and the people she loved, in her family were not treated, were not seen as or treated as fully human. And so that started, I think that sensitized me to a lot of, the problems of discrimination that we're trying to get around or over or rid of today. For religion, I can say I'm not a real institutionalized person when it comes to that. I teach philosophies of religion. I take inspiration from the ancient religions of China Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism,
Mm-hmm.
from the ancient philosophies of India. So my view of religion is not your stereotypical. I think you can get things done in a group, which is why I affiliate with the church, and I have a particular affinity for the Christian church because I was born in a Christian community and heard those stories. But I've at no point want to say that is a reason for holding other people's faith traditions as problematic or worthy of rejection.
So you've lived through many movements and seen like multiple different minority groups be discriminated against. How has that affected the way in which you look at HSU, and do you think that HSU accommodates more than just, the LGBT community, but also other minority groups?
I've been at Humboldt State University for this would be going on 28 years, 27 years, and when I first came here, I don't know if there were any Black students, African American students, or if so, very many. There weren't very many Latina or Latino students. There weren't many students of color at all. They were pretty much white, mostly Californian students, and that was sort of difficult for me to get used to, only because I'm from Washington, D.C., and it was a much more cosmopolitan area, and it was very hard to think of going through a day without seeing an African American face, or having some other culture,
Person of color.
Yeah, just and from different countries too. I mean, because we have the embassies from all over, and so it was very, very homogeneous, and I wasn't used to that at all. And one of the things that I can say is that the student body at HSU, even within the last few years, has become much more diverse, and I think has made an active commitment, and I know has made an active commitment to not only to increasing that diversity, but making it sustainable.
Do you think that even though they have made strides recently in becoming more diverse, that they kind of sometimes put out this idea that they're more diverse than they really are? How do you feel about that?
Accepting of diversity or promoting diversity or something like that? I think, for a lot of people, it's just, it's a matter of just trying to wrap your mind around what that's supposed to be, or even if you have some idea, how do you implement that? How do you put it into practice? And I want to say a couple of things. First of all, I wasn't trying to be outright critical of the Newman Center, which I'm still supportive of in many, many ways, but philosophically opposed to. In that, I don't want to, as a
bash on her. Yeah.
Right, because people have different ways of thinking about this. I certainly don't agree anymore with that, and I think that's part of why institutions like HSU, which is a state institution, not a religious institution, is moving away from that kind of, hyper-normative way of thinking about it, things. But I'm kind of going on and on. But I want to say that, being a woman in the Department of Philosophy, when I came here, there was only one other female teacher, which was a lot, given the standard picture of what philosophy looks like now. Susan Armstrong's retired, but we have one other female who's a lecturer. So it's a predominantly male department, and you see with a lot of people who have been conditioned to value certain things and do certain things.
Really are.
Right. And I think the biggest problem, around this issue is it's psychological. People have been raised with certain values and certain, ways of doing things and ways of thinking, and you're asking some people to make some pretty radical changes from the way they were taught to think about people and think about what it is to, live a good life. And so I see people who are having a hard time with it, still really committed to doing that, not necessarily knowing exactly how. As a woman in a discipline that's predominantly white, predominantly male, for me, it was natural, and I do comparative philosophy. So I drew from, China, I drew from India, I drew from, of course, from the, women's voices and, people who are speaking to issues that are not as mainstream, and so the students can see, right? So the students can have the role models, so they're not just seeing the white male talking head. They're seeing people of color. They're seeing, they're seeing women. They're seeing trans people. They're seeing, lesbians and gays being able to do this and do it well. And so the more you see that, the more you realize that the things that we've been discriminating against people for are irrelevant, right? All the things that you want a teacher to be able to do, they can do, regardless of their color or their gender, their sexual orientation, or any number of the identities we've used to marginalize people in the past. So I think I've been able to do this much more effectively being a woman and having the experience I have with how minorities have been treated in my lifetime, not liking that at all. So I've been able to be much more reflective and much more intentional about it than I think a lot of people are used to.
What is your opinion on the statement that queerness and religion are often not thought of in relation to each other, or if they are, that it's a negative connotation?
Right, and I'm very embarrassed about this because you all have some exposure to Facebook, right? I mean, there are I'm sorry to mention this. I'm telling you, there are right now, this is a movement in America. I mean, maybe it's because it's an interest of mine, but there's a movement in America of various faith traditions advocating for LGBT people, for LGBTQ rights. I knew this was going to happen because I can't remember exactly the faith ministries and the organizations that are speaking to that, that fly in the face of what you normally would think of when you think of religion and LGBTQ issues, which they don't go together, right? Yes, they do, and that's being promoted. It's been advocated. It's being advocated. Well, I can say enough. Could you stop that for a moment, though?
Yeah.
And this is why I'm going to look that up.
Look what
I think that would be a really valuable piece of information to have included in this. The faith ministries that are out there.
There are many that are advocating, but I think just saying it is good enough.
Yeah.
Oh, I think maybe a few names would be, because people will keep their eyes open for it and say, hey,
Maybe it'll push them to look.
I guess just to finish it off, would you say that St. Albans, the church that you are very much entwined with, is a resource for queer students of religion on campus?
Absolutely.